Welcome into our studio as CAA Football 12 teams in 12 days presented by Geico rolls along today with Delaware. I'm Bobby Broyles along with Tim McDonald. Tim, back-to-back 4-4 conference records for the Blue Hens, who enter their third season under the direction of head coach Dave Brock. Last year, we started to see that physical style Coach Brock wants to implement. Expect to see more of that in 2015?
I do, especially with the two-headed monster of Wes Hills and Jalen Randolph. You know, arguably the best combo of running backs in CAA football. Over 1,500 yards and 15 touchdowns together last year. And Delaware, you know, at times struggled. We did see it, you know, a consistency. You talk about back-to-back years of 4-4 in conference play. It's easy to look at their schedule and pick a couple games that they possibly could have won. You look, the loss to Sacred Heart at home, that was a heartbreaker.
Yep.
They lost to Towson at home by 7. You lose to Nova at home. And the Nova game, again, was another heartbreaker when they had a chance to win that one late. Offensively, I look at this Delaware team and I see some progression. You lose 3 huge parts in the last 3 years, and guys starters who played a lot of football for you. You lose Trent Hurley, 3-year starting quarterback. You lose Michael Johnson, and you lose Nick Boyle. I think it's almost a good sense of change for Delaware, though. It's a new, fresh start. We're not sure who's going to be the quarterback. There's a lot of question marks at that position. But the good news is, like you said, you do have Wes Hills and Jalen Randolph. They hand the ball off to. We really think it's either going to be a guy in Blake Rankin, a junior who hasn't had any college experience, or a redshirt freshman, Joe Walker. You know, I did go to the spring game, Bob, by chance. I was there for the CAA Women's Lacrosse Championship. I'm not going to give any spring game insight, but I will say Dave Brock, it is a nice little new sense of freshness for this Delaware team moving into a new year. A lot of question marks on offense, but at least you have a guy in Ben Curtis on the offensive line, a senior who's one of the best players in the league.
Here is what Delaware head coach Dave Brock had to say about his 1-2 combo in the backfield.
Well, I certainly think Jalen and Wes, you know, both bring an awful lot of ability to the table and a ton of production. We have all our production back at the running back position. We're really excited about what we think they can do for our program, and really what we're trying to do as a program is be a line of scrimmage team. So we've invested an awful lot of scholarships in our offensive line the last 2 years, an awful lot of scholarships in the defensive line. You know, so we want to be a big physical run first and operation, and we're excited about those two, and we think they could be game breakers, and they certainly will lead our offense this year.
Tim, I believe the defensive front could also be a strength as well, led by last year's CAA Football Defensive Rookie of the Year, Blaine Woodson.
Yeah, Woodson was a guy as a redshirt freshman, you know, who is going to be a sophomore this year, and he's going to be expected to be one of the leaders. You know, look at this defense. They lose 7 starters, but 3 of those 4 starters returning were from the defensive line. You look at Blaine Woodson, 51 tackles, 11 for loss, 8.5 sacks. That's as a redshirt freshman. You also have Vince Holloman and Josh Plummer, 2 guys who are seniors this year. There's only 8 seniors on this Delaware team, but at least you have 2 of them right there on the line with them. Justin Watson is also a guy who's the only returner in the secondary. He's going to be expected to lead that unit. Again, defensively at times, Delaware did pretty well against the pass last year. Their struggles were against the rush. Rush year, they were 10th in CAA, 191 yards per game. When you think of a Delaware defense and you think of Dave Brock, like you said, you think of that physicality, and I think that's something that they're going to build. Again, it's that new sense of they're going to have a lot of guys step up who haven't played before, but I also think that's a good thing because we get to see a new-look Delaware defense. We're not sure exactly who we're going to see. They lose Patrick Callaway at linebacker, a lot of guys. So it's almost a nice sense, too, to see what else we can see from this Delaware team on the defensive side of the ball. I'm interested to see what's going to happen, especially early on.
What about your guy, Eric Anderson? Can't forget about him.
Yeah, punters are people, too. You're right.
Exactly.
I wasn't going to forget about him. He was 4th in the FCS last year, 44.9 punts. Excuse me, yards per punt. So I did have that ready.
Exactly. There you go. Here is Coach Brock talking about his sophomore defensive lineman, Blaine Woodson.
Well, Blaine is a guy that we think is going to be a dominant player in this league for many years. You know, it's exciting to have a guy who's accomplished so much in his first year and get the recognition that he did, and then to have him, you know, as you know, for 3 more years. You know, he's a great leader, does a great job in the classroom, great job in the community. We really feel like he's going to be a dominant player and lead our front 7, you know, which we're trying to build and you know, make one of the best front 7s in the country at the FCS level.
Really looking forward to watching Blaine develop in just his second season. Now we turn our attention to the Blue Hens schedule. Delaware starts off with 2 non-conference games at home before hitting a tough 3-game stretch with the rivalry game at Villanova, then a trip to North Carolina out of the ACC, and finally a home date with William & Mary in the CAA Football on NBCSN season premiere.
Yeah, you know, you look at Delaware's schedule, and I think it really does benefit them to have the first 2 contests of the season versus manageable foes. And not to take anything away from Jacksonville and Lafayette, but it is really nice to start out that way and then kind of get right into the heat right away. Look at this Jacksonville team, a team that won 9 games last year out of the Pioneer. Delaware played them 2 years ago in Brock's opener, if you remember that game. Actually, a shootout in that game. Then you look at Lafayette, who's actually playing William & Mary the week before. Those games, I think, will help the offense grow because we talked about Rankin, we talked about Walker, 2 quarterbacks who don't have any college experience. This is actually the first time since 1989, according to the Delaware Archives, that Delaware's had a quarterback who has no college experience on its roster. I think those 2 games are going to be huge. Both of those guys are going to play. It's not going to be one of those guys playing the whole time. I think we're going to see both times. But then you look at the rest of the schedule. You mentioned the Battle of the Blue. This is the first time in a really long time when it's moved up. As we've talked about many times, it's thanks to the Pope visiting the Philadelphia area. So that game is going to be key, and we've seen Delaware play very well against Villanova in the past 2 years. But they certainly have some unfinished business in those 2 games versus Villanova. And then, of course, you remember last year's opener at Pitt was very tough against an ACC foe, a really tough game that Delaware doesn't want to remember. They have to go to North Carolina. That's obviously a very tough game. But then you do get William & Mary at home on NBC Sports Network. The rest of the schedule, Bob, UNH, Albany, and JMU all at home certainly benefits them in CAA football play. I'm excited. We keep talking about teams moving forward in 2015 and making changes. I think this year is going to be a do-or-tell-all for Delaware because you get a fresh start on offense, you get a fresh start on defense. I think it's good. I think optimism is high for Delaware. Again, Delaware hasn't made the playoffs in 4 straight years, Bob, but I think we know how happy that fan base gets about its football. I think it's time to change it.
Delaware opens the 2015 campaign at home on Friday, September the 4th at 7 p.m. against Jacksonville.
We have our own blog, in case you haven't realized this whole time. You can find us on cafootball.wordpress.com. You can watch a one-on-one feature with Blaine Woodson to learn more about his game day experiences.
Tomorrow, Tim and I preview the Spiders of Richmond as head coach Danny Rocco looks to build off last year's playoff run. Check back at cafootball.wordpress.com at 11 a.m. for a look at the Spiders.